Hi everyone, I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're new here, my name is Kaya. I make intentional living content. I love to talk about everything from motherhood, minimalism, just things of my life. And so yeah, if you're interested in that kind of content, I would love if you subscribed. I thought there would be no better video to put on my channel early on than my birth story with my first daughter. I think motherhood is the area on YouTube where I was most encouraged while I was pregnant, when I got pregnant the first time, and just preparing to be a mother. So when I was first inspired to make content and start a YouTube channel, this was really the area where I desired to encourage other moms, just talking about motherhood, talking about my births. And yeah, because I watch so many of stories like these, birth stories on YouTube, and I really felt like it helped prepare my mind for labor and birth and just encouraged me that everyday women like myself, other moms on YouTube, had done this before me. They had had the kind of birth that I desired to have. And I think it still fits well with my desire for just talking about intentional living on this channel. I think when I first got pregnant, and started learning about birth, that's really when I started being intentional about a lot of the decisions I make. I want to say too, real quick, that when I say intentional, it doesn't mean it's the right way or the wrong way. It's just a decision that I chose intentionally. So when I talk about birth in that way, I just want to have a little disclaimer that even if your birth experience was different than mine, it doesn't mean that it was wrong or bad. Every birth experience is so beautiful and so wonderful. And I just love hearing moms' birth stories. And I am just so excited to share mine. With that too, birth is also unpredictable, and sometimes things don't happen the way that you intentioned them to. So I just want to throw that in there. Without more talking, I just want to jump into the birth story. I feel like there's no better way to start off talking about my birth story than by saying it was one of the best days of my life. This is such a special story for me to tell, and I'm so excited to share it with you all today. Let's start with Wednesday night as labor started. I was already 41 weeks, and one day I was very tired, and I was just praying that she would come. I think, like anybody who goes over your due date, you're just excited to have your little baby in your arms. It seemed promising that it would start soon. I had lost my mucus plug that day, but I had heard that if you lose your mucus plug, it could mean labor starting very soon, or it could still be a ways away because it can reform. And so even with these signs of labor, it's so hard to know whether it's actually starting or not. So it seemed promising, but I was still really unsure. Also, the next day I had an ultrasound scheduled just to make sure that she was still doing well and there was still plenty of fluid in the sac. And I really didn't want to go to that. I didn't want to have another ultrasound. But that day, Wednesday, I had taken a really long nap. And then my husband and we decided to go on a date that night. I had heard that if you're approaching your due date, on your due date, they recommended to me that you should just go on a really fun date to take your mind off of it because it's so unlikely that you'll actually go into labor on your due date. Some people go before, obviously, and some after, but I was already, again, 8 days over my due date, and so I was getting really excited for her to come. So it seemed like a good night for us to just go on a date. So together we had gone out and just went on a really long walk around the park. It was a very nice day out. My baby was born in the spring, and so the weather was just right. Then we went to our favorite arcade in town, and that's still a fun memory of mine because we were playing games on the old style game machines. We were playing Pac-Man, and I had still gotten the high score even though I had actually had a couple contractions during it. So I like to tease my husband that I beat him at the game even though I was having contractions. After that, we went to go get dinner at our favorite pizza place. We enjoyed our pizzas together, talked a lot, just spent some really great quality time. After getting home and relaxing, I decided to start timing my first contraction at 9:48 p.m. Soon after that, I went to bed to rest because I heard that if labor is going to start soon, it's best to try to sleep as much as you can at night and ignore labor for as long as possible. So I went to bed, but if I had a really strong contraction, I would wake up and time it. I would say they were coming about every 10 to 15 minutes, but I was so tired, I was just sleeping in between. At 4 a.m. on Thursday morning, they had started coming a little more frequently, still pretty sporadic. They were every 5 to 12 minutes apart, which is a pretty big range. But at that time, I had just felt like it was time to stop ignoring them and just get in the zone. So I had gotten out of bed, grabbed my birth ball, put in my earbuds to just listen to my favorite music on my birth playlist I made, and turned on our little fairy lights in the bedroom and just set the atmosphere to start getting into the zone for birth. And I would say for about an hour, I just worked through the contractions without too much intensity, just breathing. And then my husband woke up about an hour later and made us oatmeal for breakfast. I also got some electrolytes in as this started to seem promising for early labor, and I was very excited. It was around 5 a.m. that contractions started to come every 5 to 9 minutes apart, and I would say we're growing in intensity. I would have my husband rub my back through some of them, and that was comforting. Around 7 a.m., they started to space out again to like 16 to 20 minutes apart. So it was really confusing kind of knowing what was going on, because then by 11 a.m., they were back to every 5 to 9 minutes again. So we called the midwife and asked them if they still wanted us to come in for the ultrasound that day. I actually wasn't supposed to see the midwife that day. I was just going in for the ultrasound, but it was at 3 p.m. and again, contractions had started. They did say like it sounded like I was in early labor, but it was still too early to be checked in for birth, probably. And so I just kept working through contractions. They said to call back if they felt like things got more intense. They had stayed about the same intensity and like spaced apart. So I just continued laboring at home for a while. I was listening to Christian hypnobirthing and really was just getting in the birth zone, working through the contractions, breathing. My husband would give me the counter pressure when I needed it, and that was really helpful. I was also doing last minute chores in between because we were giving birth at a birth center. I wanted to come home to a clean house and just an area that was ready for my baby. So was doing some last minute nesting. I also finished up packing my bag for the birth center to make sure that was all ready. Just some stuff that, you can't pack until last minute, like your phone chargers and things like that. I decided to bring the bag with to the ultrasound just in case. It was just really weird because after we had called them the first time, I couldn't get a hold of them again to call again when things started picking up a little bit more. So we just decided to come in for the ultrasound at 3 p.m. and brought my birth center bag with just in case we got checked in during that time, because the OBGYN/midwife office I would go for the prenatal appointments was actually connected to the birth center. They were in like the same business building. The car ride there was thankfully not too bad. I've heard stories sometimes how it's hard to have contractions in the car because you're just kind of sitting in one position and it's not comfortable. But I had, I think, 2 or 3 contractions on the way there, and it wasn't too intense at all. Once we arrived there, I got all checked in to have my ultrasound. My daughter was perfectly healthy, passed all of her tests, 100%, no concerns. So I was grateful for that. But the funny thing is they were just going to send us home. They're like, all right, you can go home now. And it was actually funny because I was having contractions during the ultrasound. And I don't know if the tech even noticed or not, but I when they got ready to send us home for the appointment, I asked them, "Can I see the midwife? I've been in early labor for a while now. I kind of would like to make a game plan." So they kind of got me like a last minute appointment with my midwife because the one on call hadn't been answering. So once I got in with one of my midwives, because there was a couple different ones I was working with throughout my pregnancy, but I had the other midwife that was not on call at the birth center, the one who was just working in office that day. And I actually didn't want to have any cervical exams during labor. That didn't go as I had desired, but that was the first one that I had. They had kind of said, well, you needed to have a cervical exam to get checked into the birth center to make sure you were far enough along in labor. But because I had already been in labor, it was just kind of confusing. So they did ask if they could do a cervical exam just to see where I was at and see if I should go home still after this appointment now, or if I should just get checked into the birth center. So it was funny because when she checked me, I was already, to like everyone's surprise, 5 to 6 centimeters dilated and 100% effaced. So I don't think they expected me to be that far along and coping with the contractions so well. And so she kind of gave me the option. You all you had to be was dilated to like a 5 to be checked into the birth center. So she offered, do you want to get checked into the birth center right now, or do you want to wait a bit? It was up to me. It's funny because I actually had thought, oh, let's go hiking. I was just ready to get her like going, like get things going and get her out. So we had thought about actually driving up to a hiking trail because we have lots of them where we live. But I decided, nah, we should probably stay like close-ish around the birth center. So we just went out to the parking lot, and there was a little like nature trail kind of near there. And so we just walked about a mile down the road, and it started picking up quick. Like my contractions started coming every couple minutes. I think just that like walking is so good once you're in labor. It had really encouraged things to speed up. So we decided to head back to the birth center after not making it very far. And we got all checked in because they'd already checked me at the appointment. I was just ready to go. They took my vitals, and I was working through a contraction. After that contraction, I had gone to get some snacks. I was so excited because the birth center, part of the whole experience is they just had like unlimited snacks. And so I went out and got some oat bites and some trail mixes and one of those little like squeeze applesauces. They really just believed in women staying hydrated and eating plenty through labor to keep their bodies and labors going well. So I would just eat and drink in between contractions during still that beginning/middle part of labor to fuel my body for the rest of labor to come. Every contraction was pretty rhythmic in the way that I coped through it. I would feel the surge coming on, and then I would have my husband come rub my back, and I would just breathe deeply through the contraction. And then when I was done, we would move on again. During that time, I had done a few contractions, just forward leaning on the bed, but my favorite thing was leaning into this birth sling that they had at the birth center. It kind of reminded me of a hammock that they hung from the ceiling, and I just like leaned into that thing, and it held up all my weight, and it felt so good, and I would just rock back and forth in a swaying motion, just fully leaning into that birth sling. I actually did that routine for, I would say, a couple hours, just leaning into the sling. I would sometimes move back to the birth ball and do some hip circles and forward leaning, whatever felt good. I was trying a lot of different positions to try to engage her head with my cervix to continue dilating. Eventually, I had asked for the birth tub to be filled. I just was so excited to use the birth tub they had at the birth center, and I had felt like things were moving along quite a bit. Contractions were still coming about the same rate. I want to pause to say that looking back, my labor was anything but textbook or predictable. I've had 4 years to process through this labor, so even I wrote down my birth story right away. But it was funny because when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I actually did a lot more processing through this labor and just recognizing where things could have maybe gone a little better, maybe what had caused this labor to be so sporadic. But my labor was definitely not a textbook labor. So I got into the birth tub, and it was a fancy one. It wasn't a blow-up one like they use for home births. It was like an actual ceramic birth tub that had like a shower head attached to it, and it had like lights. It was fancy. It was so cool. And so they checked the temperature. It was nice and warm. They let me get in. And so I had several contractions in the tub. I was listening to a lot of worship music during that time and still just staying hydrated, breathing through, having my husband give me the counter pressure. It felt very rhythmic. And by this point, it was already like Thursday evening. So obviously labor had started early that morning. It was probably already 8 or 9 p.m. by this time. I actually had thought that maybe I was in transition during that time, that I had gotten into the tub, because I had thrown up a couple of times, and in other women's birth stories like these, I had heard that when you throw up, it usually means you're in transition or close to it. They had wondered if the birth tub was slowing down my labor because they thought that sometimes it can be too relaxing. I've heard that before, but I don't know if that was quite the issue. Processing back again, I just want to add that into the birth story because I've processed it a lot. I think what made me feel really uncomfortable was that they were both sitting there just watching me labor. And, the saying, a watched pot never boils. Yeah, I just did not feel like private and safe, which are really key elements to labor progressing the way it should. So after they had asked me to get out of the tub and I had been doing some more laboring with the birth sling, I think this is the point where discouragement had started to set in. So I had gotten out of the tub, did some more contractions with the birth sling, and I think in about, I would say like a 1 to 2 hours had gone by. It was probably 10-ish at night. But yeah, this is where discouragement really started to set in. My midwife had came up to me and started to talk about if basically natural interventions. I just had this feeling that they had thought things were taking too long, which that's a lovely feeling, to feeling like you're bothering somebody else by taking too long to have your baby. But at the time, I didn't know that. I just, was working through the contractions. I was peaceful. And my labor was going great. Like my vitals were always doing well, and my baby's vitals were always doing well. So medically, there was no reason to speed things up. But again, it felt maybe inconvenient to them. Maybe they thought it should be going faster. I'm not sure. I was coping super well with the contractions, just breathing and relaxing into all of them. But I was a first-time mom, and it was just taking a while for my body to keep dilating. So they had started offering a lot of natural interventions. They had offered to pop my water bag because my water hadn't popped yet, actually. And so they had offered to do that to maybe bring her head down a little more. They had offered me a tincture. They had offered me to like start doing more walking and more active things, active positions for labor. And then at the end of all that, she said, look, if you get tired or your uterus gets tired or your baby starts to experience distress, you know that would mean a transfer to the hospital, right? And so I need you to choose basically something to get labor going. So that felt really crushing. Man, that was so discouraging because here I am, somebody who had who struggles with perfectionism, and having your midwife come up, and basically what I heard was that, like, even though it's not what she said, it's just the feeling of the things that she said was kind of just felt like she had stopped believing in me. Like, you can't do this. Your body probably isn't going to keep doing this. So you need to like figure out a plan so we can intervene and get things rolling. Ugh, so upsetting, but yeah, so that discouragement kicked in and things really slowed down. My body started getting tired, and of course, night was coming. I had been laboring and up since 4 a.m. They had kind of pressured me into finding out where I was at again. And so I had a cervical, 1 or 2 cervical exams during that time. And I think I had only dilated like maybe 1 or 2 centimeters. So after she said that to me, I went to the bathroom to talk with my husband and pray. That kind of ended up being our little sanctuary in the place because it was the only place I was not being watched every second, which was nice. So we would go in there and just talk about all the options and the things that they had said, and he just encouraged me so kindly. And we decided we were just not going to break waters yet or do any of the tincture stuff. We were just going to start walking and doing the more active positions. So I did that for a while longer. It was already late at night. Then the midwife had told us that we should try doing the mile circuit. Maybe my baby was in a bad position, which could have been true with how things had started stalling. But also knowing about the like psychology of labor, I think I also felt a little unsafe and just that didn't help things. So she suggested we did the mile circuit, so I did do that. And at that point, I think it was already like midnight. So I had gone through the whole mile circuit, which if you are familiar with that, that takes about an hour and a half. I think each position's about 30 minutes and there's 3 of them. So I did that and it was super uncomfortable to have contractions doing that. But we did it. And after that, I actually fell asleep and got like I don't know, like 3 or 4 hour nap. My husband also got to sleep during then, which I was so glad for him because he had been up supporting me through this whole labor. He is the best. I've 2 labors now. He is the best birth partner, dad doula. He's so supportive and encouraging. So after sleeping that few hours, I woke up in the morning just ready to go. That rest felt great. I maybe had 1 or 2 contractions during that whole time. And I was so glad to get that rest. It felt like it was a new day. It was already Friday. So again, remember when labor started Wednesday and it was already Friday now. So that was also glad because the midwives switched shifts at that point. So again, because there was 2 midwives that worked at the birth center, they switched out, which I was also glad because at that point I was really over the midwife who had been saying all those discouraging things to me. So to see a fresh face and just a change. Also the midwife that ended up being there when I delivered my daughter, she was a little more experienced. The other one was a newer midwife. So I was just glad to have the change. So when she had done a cervical exam, I was still only at like a 7 centimeters dilated. Obviously not much like dilation progress had happened during that time, but I decided to labor a bit in the shower. I had eaten a strawberry popsicle for breakfast. So yeah, I ate the popsicle and then got in the shower and labored for quite a while in the shower, and that felt pretty nice, just having the hydrotherapy on my back. They had not wanted me to get back in the pool because of how stalled things were. So that was kind of disappointing to me, but the hot water in the shower was like second best. And then I did the whole just bunch of activities again. I was walking, I was bouncing on the ball, doing hip circles, all of those kind of different positions, deep squat. I tried everything that there is for labor positions. After all that time during the morning time, she asked to check my cervix again. Obviously, again, if you remember, I said I did not want my cervix checked at all during this labor, but it happened so many times. And it was just, yeah, really uncomfortable. I did not like that. And so I still was only at an 8, so some progress. But yeah, 8 centimeters dilated. And so she again brought up all the interventions. But at this point, obviously being Friday morning, I was just thinking like, okay, we'll do something. And so I said yes, I consented to popping my waters. And that didn't do a thing, honestly. But I just kept coping through the contractions well, breathing. That was just like my best thing, was breathing and trying different positions. After being in the shower for a little longer, this point, I just felt so over it. Again, Friday morning, early afternoon, I just had started feeling like giving up. I was crying because I just felt so sad, like that she just wasn't coming yet. And it felt like I was broken, or like the process was wrong, like it just wasn't happening as fast as they were thinking. And I had been at the birth center for a day, basically. Yeah, full 24 hours. I decided to call my mentor, and it was so cool, actually. I was so glad she answered the phone. I was like, I'm in labor and I just feel so sad. Like I've been here for so long and I've been doing all these things and I just don't know. Like I don't know when it's going to happen. But it was so cool. The words she spoke to me in that time, she told me, you, Kea, are a good mom, whether you have your baby at this birth center or whether you go to the hospital and you need the epidural, like whatever you need, you are a good mom and like your birth will be beautiful, basically. And that was such an encouragement to me, even though I knew what I had wanted and desired, just that feeling of like relief. And she also prayed with me as well. My husband and I had been praying throughout this whole entire labor. That was so encouraging to have that during that time. And I felt like that was actually the breakthrough. Emotionally, that breakthrough led to transition and might have even been part of transition, because I do know, like psychologically, the whole desire to escape. So my husband and I went outside to the parking lot of this business complex. Mind you, the birth center and the OBGYN's office is not the only place in these birth centers. So I felt a little silly going to the parking lot to labor. But my husband and I, we walked down the stairs, which felt so hard because she had gotten so low and I was having intense contractions by then. And I was like feeling like I was going to have to crawl, like walking was too hard. And so we went into this parking lot. I had done like a few contractions out there because my midwife had recommended getting some fresh air maybe. And so we had gone outside for like 2 minutes, and I was like, I need to go back inside. Like, this is too much. So we walked back up the stairs, and I was like literally needing to crawl. I would stop and pause just to have the contraction. Obviously, at this point, they were fairly intense. So after we got back inside, she had wanted to check me again. And so at this point, consent honestly went out the window. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And so she said I was pretty much fully dilated, but I had just had like a cervical lip that her head was getting stuck on. And so I had done different positions that she had asked me to do. I had gotten on the bed for a little bit, and I think one of them I had to get on the bed and like lay on my side with my leg, one of my legs up by my face, and try to like push through. And she actually like moved the cervical lip for me so that her head could get past. Again, knowing all that I know now, I just know that I wasn't ready to push. But I was thankful because this is the experience I had, and it was a good experience overall. Obviously, there's some things I'm bringing up that are like, oh, I didn't like this, but it was just a learning experience for next time. Overall, the whole experience was so positive, no, even with how it went, how long it was. I just felt so good coping through most of those contractions, so relaxed. So I got to the point of being ready to push. She had moved past the cervical lip, and to just not like drag this on, I pushed, and I pushed for about 3 hours apparently. At that point, I was so exhausted, and like so many labor hormones had kicked in that I was like super just out of it. So I did not know that 3 hours had gone by. I pushed, and finally, I remember when she started to crown. Oh, I was so glad. Again, that took several pushes because of how long I pushed. But praise the Lord, she was so healthy throughout all of this. Like, I could see how in some labors, like the baby's heart rate might start to be elevated, or mine. Like, praise the Lord, she was just so healthy. There was never a concern with her. And so I kept pushing and pushing. And then finally I got her body out. And she's like, here's your baby. And so I picked her up to my arms and was just so happy to finally have her in my arms and be done. And so the position I actually ended up pushing in, because I didn't get to do the water, was they had like a birthing stool. And so I had my husband behind me and just like my arms up resting on his knees. And I like was doing a deep squat basically on this birthing stool. And yeah, that's how I pushed her out. And that's where she was delivered. And yeah, they helped me pull her up to me. After that, I was just super high on labor hormones and also I think fatigue. So I was super out of it. I remember just snuggling her. I remember getting to initiate breastfeeding was so special. And it was a really great experience. I was so excited, so happy and thankful I got to have her at the birth center. It was 7 p.m. by the time I pushed her out Friday night. So obviously very long labor, but so worth it. And honestly, such a good experience. I was so thankful that I could have the experience that I desired and had prepared for. And even with all of the things that didn't go perfect, it was like something that I just look back on and am so grateful for, and was one of the best days of my life. I felt like it started out my motherhood just so well, getting to like have this feeling like I did it. So they got me all cleaned up. Yeah, we initiated breastfeeding. And then the coolest thing is, one of the things with this labor, I had prayed that it would rain. It was springtime, and I just love the rain so much. I love a big thunderstorm. And no joke, at like 7:03 p.m., a big like thunder just like rolled and cracked, and like it just started like torrential downpouring. I could hear outside, and I just thought that was so cool. Like, it just felt like a little love letter from God, that he was with me throughout that whole birth, and he was so present. Even when it was hard, he was like with me. But yeah, after that, they had just told us a bunch of stuff. We did all the like exiting paperwork. And the thing about a birth center is at least this one, they discharge you 4 hours after having your baby. So that felt a little intense, honestly, because I had been there so long. But I was kind of glad for the 4 hour thing because I was also super ready to go home. Like, I was just good with getting out of there and leaving. It was like 11 p.m. We had the best night's sleep, I would say, like, of my whole daughter's life. I know you're supposed to wake up every like 2 hours to breastfeed them. She slept like 8 hours in a row as a newborn. I had woke up terrified that something bad had happened to her. Thankfully, she was just fine. And it's really normal for them to like take a super long nap after being born. Was great after that. And we breastfed just fine. But I was so worried. Like, new mom, you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot to wake up and like feed the baby. Overall, it was such a positive experience. And I was just so grateful for it all. And really happy that the Lord was with me, and just even for the hard parts or the parts that weren't ideal, it was just such a great experience to have, and one of the best days of my life. A story I'm excited for my daughter to hear when she's older, and hopefully encourage, my daughters in what birth can be like, in being a positive, beautiful experience. Intense and powerful, but beautiful. So that's my birth story with my first daughter. I am going to post my birth story with my second daughter soon as well. So I'm really excited to do that. I'm so glad you joined me here today. If you've stayed all the way through the end, thank you so much. I hope this story encouraged and inspired you. I hope this story just builds your confidence as you approach labor. It was such a transformative experience for me. Find the beauty in it and be excited for it, because it's not an experience to dread. It's an experience to celebrate and look forward to. So, thanks again for joining. Again, I make intentional living content and I love to talk about motherhood. So I just wanted to make this video. I hope that you'll join me for future videos. Have a great week. Bye.